Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you happen to be. My name is Joe, and I'm on the product marketing team here at Cisco Meraki. And thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the Cisco Meraki MX security appliance and how it can be used to provide simple, straightforward security for K-12 networks. There are a few different things we're going to cover. We're going to start, this is actually kind of a limited agenda. We're going to go a little bit off the beaten path here. There's some things I want to talk about today, some new developments that I'm excited to share with you. But to give you a basic idea, we're going to start with an introduction to what is Cisco Meraki for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We're going to get into the MX specifically, which of course is the focus of this webinar. We're going to talk about the capabilities, the use cases, why it's a great product for education and for K-12 specifically, as well as kind of what's new with the product, what's been happening, and what we have coming up that's relevant to the K-12 space. We're going to get into a live demo. We're going to take a look at some of these capabilities because really at the end of the day, all the Meraki products are much more about the kind of value of these products is much more about the user experience, the management experience. That's what really differentiates us from a lot of the other vendors out there in the industry. So we want to make sure that you get to see that and you get to spend some time looking at the actual user interface, the dashboard, which is pretty consistently, customers' favorite thing about Meraki. It's all about the dashboard. So we're going to spend a good chunk of our time there. We will talk a little bit about the MX product lineup, the hardware portfolio, and a few other odds and ends as well. And then we'll hopefully have some time at the end for Q&A. There's also sort of a surprise bit that I'm going to cover toward the end here that some of you may have already heard about, but in case you haven't, I'm not going to spoil it for you. So first things first, who are we? What do we do? And why am I here talking to you today? Well, Cisco Meraki is a division of Cisco, as you might expect. And what we do is we provide cloud-managed IT solutions. And we started out in wireless back in the day in about 2006. Really before that, if you count the research work that was being done at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is where all this sort of kicked off, a project called RoofNet. But as a company, Meraki was founded in about 2006 and started moving into sort of the wireless space. From there, we moved into security, the MX, which we'll be talking about today. From there into switching. From there into mobile device management. And then there's actually a brand new addition to the portfolio, which I will talk about a little bit later. It's not really the focus of this webinar, but I don't want to leave it out because I think it's a really exciting addition. And it adds to kind of the full stack value, what we like to call the full stack value of the Meraki products, where you get all of your IT management in one simple single pane of glass through the dashboard. A couple of notes about us. We've been growing incredibly quickly, which is very exciting to see. We've been seeing a lot of people get excited and adopt these cloud-managed networking, cloud-managed IT technologies. I'll show you a couple bits of that when we get into the demo, some of the, not really metrics, but just some cool things that we've seen in terms of the growth of Meraki kind of products and services out there in the world and how many people are actually implementing and leveraging these technologies. And we've always kind of had a lot of really dedicated fans out there pushing this stuff, which is great, and it's something that we're very happy about. As I mentioned, 4 major product lines with a 5th one, brand new, that I will be talking about in a little bit. And the key to all of this is all these products are unified through the management in the Meraki dashboard. And again, we'll look at that in the demo. We've always had a really kind of positive relationship with the K-12 market. We've always had kind of a lot of our business come from education. Since the very earliest days of Meraki, back when we were just wireless, it's been one of our main markets, just because our sort of message of simplicity and ease of management speaks to, I think, a lot of education IT administrators and IT professionals, because at the end of the day, IT staff in an education environment, like a lot of folks in education environments, are expected to do a lot with potentially very few resources, right? You don't have a huge staff of IT folks on site at every campus or satellite campus. Even if you're all on one consolidated campus, you tend to have a pretty small dedicated team of folks trying to make sure the network's running, all the services are being delivered to educators and to students, and they're not really as large as you might expect given the size of the network, the number of users that they're supporting. So that message of, look, we can take a lot of this IT administration and IT day-to-day kind of work and simplify it, make it much easier, much more accessible, and just remove some of those headaches and challenges. That's always resonated very well with education. And it's something that we've continued to see, and you can see a few examples here of some of the K-12 campuses out there that we've seen deploying Meraki security. And these are, of course, just a few examples. There are a ton of others that we could point out, but we like to just throw these on a slide for you. So how does all this work? When I say cloud managed, there's a lot of different folks out in the industry using the term cloud in a lot of different ways. So when we say cloud managed networks or cloud managed IT, we want to make sure you understand what it is we're actually talking about, and that you understand what our version of that term or that concept is. And in our case, it's actually pretty straightforward. There's two components to cloud managed IT, the way that I personally think about it. There's the communication between your Meraki devices and the cloud, and there's the communication between you and the cloud. So at the simplest level, all that cloud managed IT means when we say it here at Cisco Meraki is instead of managing your network devices, your endpoints through something like a Java app like ASDM for the Cisco ASA, our kind of sister product, or something like a command line interface or any of the other tools out there, what you do is you do it all through a cloud-based web dashboard. It's very simple, very intuitive. It's all GUI. It's all point and click. It does not require a ton of dedicated training. It's something that anyone who is, has a reasonable knowledge of IT can kind of just pick up and run with. And I can say that from experience because I was actually a Meraki customer prior to coming to Meraki, and I was tasked with deploying wireless. And I'm a security and routing guy. I know nothing about wireless. I mean, I've learned a little bit, obviously, here at Meraki, but if you go back a few years to when I was doing this, no knowledge of wireless whatsoever. And I was able to implement a full, corporate guest segmented wireless network without having to learn all that much because the interface is so easy to use, it's so intuitive, and once you've got it configured, once you've got it deployed, there's so much data available to you to help you fine-tune your configuration. There's so much monitoring and so many analytics built in. It's really, really powerful, and it's very, very easy to use, and that's really the core of the value of all the Meraki products. So the way that sort of cloud management actually works, the way that you actually get from the place of you going into a browser and making a change or adding a new access point to a network, things like that, the way you get from that to the devices actually getting that is through this kind of cloud architecture. So first I wanted to talk about device and cloud communication. So every AP, security appliance, switch, MDM endpoint, every Meraki product is going to talk to the cloud. And the way it's going to do that is by forming a secure tunnel over the internet, which means that as soon as you plug that thing in, give it power, give it internet access, not necessarily directly internet access, might be plugged into your network and go up through the network to the internet, but if it can talk to the internet and it's got power, it's going to call home, it's going to identify itself, it's going to form that encrypted tunnel, and it's going to pull down its configuration from the cloud, it's going to start shipping up monitoring data, metadata, analytics data to the cloud. It's going to potentially pull down firmware updates if it needs them when it first comes up, and thereafter on a schedule that you specify. All this stuff is done automatically, and it means that really you can configure everything before you ever have the device in hand, and you just plug it in, pulls the config down, and it goes. It's really, really something. So that's the device and cloud side, and there's a lot of different pieces to that, but the main two things that happen there are pulling down things like configs and firmware, right, and security updates for the security features, and pushing up things like monitoring data. So client data, what kind of devices are we seeing? What kind of traffic are users passing? What kind of events are we seeing in terms of managing and monitoring the network? So all of that is passed seamlessly and automatically through that cloud connection, that tunnel. The other piece of that, as I mentioned, is how do you talk to the cloud? Well, the way you talk to the cloud is through the dashboard. So when we're in the demo today and we're looking at all the things you can do in the Meraki dashboard, that's your portal into the cloud. That web dashboard is the way that you go in, access that cloud infrastructure, and make changes to your configuration, add new devices to your networks, tweak your settings, tweak your alerting, all these kinds of things, add administrators, remove administrators, whatever you want to do, it's all done through that cloud dashboard. So that's your sort of web portal that you use to communicate with the cloud and to manage all of your devices. A couple things I want to highlight from the data on the right here. I'm not going to go through every piece line by line. I hate it when people just give me slides and then just read off them, but I do want to highlight a couple things. One of them is the very first point under secure there. The user data, the actual traffic that students, educators, IT administrators, staff, whoever are using, passing through the network, that stuff doesn't go to the cloud. So if you go to Google and you're searching, or you go to YouTube and you pull up a video, or anything you want to do, Spotify, it doesn't matter. None of that stuff goes through the cloud. It's all going through, in our case, a security appliance, right, for purposes of this webinar, and then out to the internet, or it's routed elsewhere onto the network, over an MPLS, whatever it is. It's the same way it would be with a non-cloud managed solution. The difference is just the management and monitoring. The command and control traffic, is, if you will, is to the cloud. So we get, analytics and stuff about the kind of traffic passing through it, but the traffic itself that the users are generating is not going through the cloud. And obviously that's important for privacy, security reasons, compliance reasons. The other thing I want to highlight before we move on from this slide is that the second to last bullet at the very bottom, network functionality when the connection to cloud is interrupted. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But this is one of the most common questions or concerns that we get when we talk about this cloud managed architecture. People say, well, what happens if I lose my cloud connectivity, right? Maybe I lose internet. Maybe my ISP goes down. Maybe there's an ISP routing problem. Maybe the cloud is unavailable for some reason. Maybe I've got, some issue on mine. Whatever it is, there are things that can happen that can cause you to not be able to talk to the Meraki cloud. So what happens to your devices when that happens? Well, the simple answer is really doesn't change very much in terms of the functionality of the device. It's got a local copy of its configuration that it's downloaded from the cloud already. It's going to keep running on that configuration, serving clients, inspecting traffic, pulling together logs and metadata. All that stuff's going to continue happening. It's just going to run on the sort of the last known good configuration. The difference is you won't be able to go in and make configuration changes. There are a couple minor exceptions to that. There are a few things you can do directly through a web interface that's built into the device locally, and that's really designed to allow you to reconnect yourself to the cloud if you've made a configuration change that breaks connectivity, either on your MX security appliance or an upstream WAN switch or whatever else. If you've changed a VLAN or you've changed your IP scheme upstream, or your provider has given you a new static IP and you didn't move it over time, whatever it is, we want to make sure you can go in and fix that without having to get to the cloud, because obviously you won't be able to if you've got connectivity issues there. So there is a local interface that allows you to do things like update your IP address on the the uplink on the WAN of the MX and any of our devices really, or change the VLAN tagging or some of those basic things, just to make sure that if you lose cloud connectivity for a configuration reason, you are able to fix that locally, because obviously you need to be able to do that. The other cool thing about this is we keep pulling all those logs, all that metadata. We keep storing all of that in the MX itself. And again, this is true of any of our devices. Rather than just having a big gray section of a chart that says, well, we didn't have cloud connectivity, so we don't have any data about what users were doing on the network at this time, we store all of it. We cache it locally on the device, and then when we reconnect to the cloud, we send all that up and backfill that time period. So you still have all that data. So really, from a functional perspective, very little changes if you lose cloud connectivity. It's just the management piece that's interrupted. If you want to know more about security, compliance, reliability, any of this type of information, meraki.cisco.com/trust has a bunch of data about our architecture, about compliance and certifications and all that good stuff. So if you're interested in that, that's a great resource for you to look at. All right, so now that I've sort of explained how this cloud management thing works, the next question is, why does this matter? Why is it important for K-12? And not just the cloud management piece, but why is the MX and the other Cisco Meraki products, why are they a good fit for K-12? And there's a couple reasons. One that I already sort of touched on is that it's very, very easy to use. And that's important when you're dealing with what we call a lean IT environment. And almost every educational institution that I've worked with, especially in K-12, does have that challenge. They have a small, dedicated IT staff who's working their butts off and trying to make sure everything is running smoothly, that everyone has the resources they need, and they've got a million things to do. They've got no time to do them, right? They're kind of overstretched all the time. And when you have that kind of environment, the more you can do to offload some of that stress and kind of remove some of those day-to-day challenges, get out of that firefighting and be able to, get some of that time back, the better. It's hugely important. I think pretty much every IT professional in the world would agree, but especially those in resource-constrained environments like K-12 education. So the fact that it's very easy to use, that you can get up and running very quickly, it doesn't require a lot of complex training or specific knowledge of how to use the individual products is very important, especially because you can actually control all the Meraki products through the same dashboard UI. So what I mean by that is it's not just managing security, it's managing security, switching, wireless, mobility management for like iPads and other endpoint devices. All that stuff is in one single pane of glass, one unified dashboard. which means, and this is the key thing from a training perspective, if you know how to manage Meraki wireless today, you also know how to manage Meraki security. It'll take you probably 5 minutes to go through, look at all the different menu options, and go, okay, I know how to do this. Because the model, the way that you approach it is exactly the same. It's just different menu options, different buttons in the same exact platform. So that means that it really becomes very powerful when you start looking at what we call the full stack solution, where you're combining the different technologies together, because you have one unified management and monitoring pane that everything is included in, and you don't have to learn a different management platform or different language or anything to manage the different components of your network. They're all managed the same way. It's very easy to move from one to the other, and it's especially important for IT generalists who, when you don't have a dedicated security team or a dedicated switch team or a dedicated wireless team, you've got one or a few guys trying to do all of this at once. That's hugely important. One other thing that's crucial here is kind of the flexibility and the level of visibility that you have into these devices. I sort of lump these second and third pieces together a little bit. I think at the end of the day, it's all about how much you know about what's going on in your network and what you can do to react to that or to adjust based on that information. That's, at the end of the day, that's what allows you to be effective as an IT professional, is knowing as much as you can about the network and being able to act on that data. So that's where a lot of these other pieces come in. We've got built-in diagnostics, built-in tools in the dashboard to allow you to do things like take packet captures, do cable testing on the switches, for instance. On the security appliance, you can see a live graph of how much traffic is being passed through the appliance. There's all this stuff built into the platform. The packet capture thing is incredibly useful for troubleshooting at kind of a deeper level as well. And then you've got that single pane of glass where you've got visibility into all these devices. So if you've got satellite campuses, if you've got multiple products in a single campus or a single location, all of that is contained in one place. It's very easy to get to. It's very accessible to go in and find the information you need. And when you're deploying, let's say a new campus, satellite campus, a home teleworker solution for an administrator or for a principal or a superintendent or someone, it's also very, very easy. So because of that kind of cloud managed model, as I mentioned before, you really just pre-configure everything, drop the device in, power it up, connect it to the network, and go. Very simple. In terms of visibility into the actual details of what's happening on the network, there's a lot of data that we actually put right there in the dashboard. So with a lot of other solutions, what you'll see is if you want in-depth visibility into what's happening on the network, be it from a client perspective, user perspective, from a traffic perspective, a variety of other things, you have to go and buy a third-party product or solution, a monitoring software perhaps, to go in, aggregate a bunch of syslog data, SNMP data, whatever else, in order to put that picture together that you can then act on. We've tried to build as much of that as possible into the dashboard, so that the same platform that you use for configuration, deployment, management is also used for monitoring, and everything you need is in there. We do still have the ability to do things like export via syslog or use SNMP, but the goal is that you should be able to do pretty much everything you need to do in dashboard, and all the data you need should be there. So we've got a variety of things kind of to touch on there, and we'll look at that in the demo and see some of those capabilities. But we've also got, of course, that second aspect, which is how do you act on that? Well, we've got built-in layer 7 firewalling. We've got built-in CIPA-compliant content filtering, security filtering for intrusion prevention and anti-malware, alerting, automatic email alerting from the cloud so that you don't have to stand up an email server. We've got integration with Active Directory and other directory services to allow you to apply policies to different groups of users based on a variety of different criteria. There's a ton of stuff in there. We've got integration, what we call Sentry integration with our mobile device manager. So if you've got Systems Manager to manage your iPads, tablets, Chromebooks, whatever it is, especially in like a one-to-one tablet environment, you can integrate that Systems Manager MDM natively with the security appliance. And you can say apply different policies to these different devices based on their MDM posture, based on whether or not they've got the correct passcode settings, based on what user is logged onto the device, all these different things. So just to give a quick snapshot of the capabilities, because we've been talking a lot about sort of how do you use this, what is the value, but I want to take a step back for a second and just talk about what the solution includes. So there's quite a few things here. First of all, you've got your security functionality. Now, a lot of this kind of intermingles, but you can sort of line it up into three key components. Security, which includes next generation firewall, VPN capabilities, also sort of falls into networking, of course, intrusion detection and prevention, and it's not listed here, but anti-malware. I actually have some news for you guys on that front that I will talk about momentarily. You've got all the networking and routing components, things like your basic NAT, DHCP for IP addressing, 3G and 4G automatic failover if you need cellular failover for a location where maybe the internet isn't great and it's cost prohibitive to get a second line, things like that. Routing, automatic load balancing, automatic failover with high availability, our IWAN functionality, which I'm not going to get too heavy into today, just in the interest of time, but basically allows you to leverage SD-WAN or software-defined WAN capabilities natively on the MX. So instead of having to get a software-defined WAN solution to create robust, simple connectivity between satellite campuses, for instance, you can do all of that automatically, natively in the MX. You can do things like send certain types of traffic over certain VPN paths between your satellites, prioritize certain types of traffic, automatically and dynamically adjust to performance changes in the connections between your different locations, so that we can automatically, let's say, move a certain type of traffic that's very performance sensitive over to the better path between the head campus or the main campus and a satellite. And then finally, you have application control. So that's geography-based firewall rules, traffic shaping, which includes both bandwidth limitations and prioritization of traffic, the URL content filtering, which is either category or URL-based, a bunch of components packed together in what we call a unified threat management platform, basically to give you this all-in-one box, all-in-one security and connectivity. That's the goal here. So how does this apply to education? Well, in a few different ways. One is, again, very, very easy to deploy. So if you have multiple satellite campuses or if you have a few central campuses, very, very easy to not only deploy the devices, which we've already talked about, but to get your configuration lined up. So you can set up VPN connectivity between campuses very, very easily. It's incredibly, incredibly simple with Meraki to set up VPN. You literally go in, 3 clicks, you're done. And I will show you that in the demo if we have time. We have templated configuration. So if you have a few different satellites that all should be running the same general configuration, you can create one configuration and tie the different campuses to it. We have automatic failover between MPLS and VPN, as well as the new IWAN functionality. It allows you to automatically failover between multiple VPN paths as well. And all of that same easy centralized management we talked about before, where you literally have one single place that you go to manage all of your security across all your campuses and potentially all of your switching, wireless, MDM, etc. as well, depending on which Meraki products you're leveraging. Right? The content filtering is obviously important for education. It's one of the key kind of functionalities that education customers need. We have built-in CIPA-compliant content filtering through a provider called BrightCloud. BrightCloud is an offering from a company called WebRoot. Some of you may be familiar with it. They're one of the kind of standard, very well-respected filtering and content security companies out there in the world. We use their database. It's a global database, billions of URLs, and what we do is allow you to apply policies to different groups of users, to different students, administrators, educators, with different categories that are blocked or allowed, and different specific URLs that you can block or allow as well. So if you want a different content filtering policy for educators versus students, which in most cases you would, it's very, very easy to do that. And of course, and this isn't purely for education, this is, everybody cares about this today, but it's something that I think becomes very important when you've got a lot of students running around, because students, are probably some of the most bandwidth consumptive users you can have, just because, especially nowadays, every student has grown up in this age of instant information delivery and instant content delivery and streaming media. So they've all got Netflix, they've all got Spotify, they've all got all this stuff on their phone, on their iPad, whatever it is, and it's just ubiquitous for them. It's always been there, and they know it's everywhere. So they're going to use it. And that can present challenges, because you've got to, make sure they're not doing things they shouldn't be doing at school. So part of that is the content filtering, and part of it is the application kind of aware traffic shaping and bandwidth shaping. And the other thing is you've got to make sure that they're not sucking down all your bandwidth, because at the end of the day, you have a job to do as an educational institution. That job is to, provide a first-class education for those students, and that means you need to be able to deliver educational content, use whatever programs or software you need to use to do that, and you need to make sure you have the bandwidth available in order to do that. And that's where things like bandwidth and usage controls come in. So we will identify users, applications, devices. We'll tie all that together to tell you which devices or which users are using which applications, how much bandwidth, how many flows, all that data available to you, and then allow you to control that with things like content filtering, right, anti-malware, intrusion prevention for security, as well as bandwidth monitoring and bandwidth controls. So the bandwidth controls piece allows you to do things like, well, we're only going to allow so much bandwidth per client for Netflix or for YouTube or for whatever it is. Or if you want to, completely block those applications. Personally, what I've found, and to be honest, some of this comes from my, what you might call delinquent youth, I've found that if you give someone who is technology aware, a student who's technology aware, a thing that blocks them from doing something, the first thing they're going to do, and they're going to devote enormous amounts of time to it, is figuring out how to get around it, right? It's just kind of human nature, especially for younger folks. So we've actually found that bandwidth limiting to a very low, very low number is, in a lot of cases, more effective than blocking, because if it's blocked, that immediately it's a challenge, right, for a lot of the students, especially the ones who are more tech savvy. If it's really slow, a lot of folks will just assume the internet's crappy, right? There's something going on with the internet, there's something wrong, and they're just going to struggle through it. And they might just give up. And we've actually seen that trend, and it's actually a pretty interesting trend from a kind of a, I guess, psychological or sociological perspective. Another thing that we can do, and this sort of touches on my earlier comments about how important it is to remove a lot of the stress and the headaches and the challenges of day-to-day network management, is just reduce the complexity of network management. You have that one single pane of glass, you have automatic discovery of devices, you just add them into dashboard, they pop up, they're connected to dashboard, they download their config, all that stuff happens automatically. You have things like this image here, which is our topology, where Meraki devices will automatically discover each other, and dashboard builds for you dynamically a network diagram of how all these devices are connected to each other. So you can trace an individual user's path out to the internet very easily. And all of that is, again, automatic. You don't have to upload anything. It's just done natively. You have all the built-in troubleshooting and diagnostic tools. You have reporting, both in detail and kind of summarized reporting over time that you can email on a schedule, things like that, just to get an idea of the overview of what's happening on the network. And you have automatic alerting. So if devices go down, or if a specific action is taken, or something that triggers an event, that event can be sent directly to you via email from the cloud with no need to stand up an email server or anything else like that. On the security side, I've touched on some of these pieces, but because we've got a new development here, there's something I want to highlight real quick. So we've always had, I think, a great story around security. We've got snort, intrusion detection and prevention, which is very important for a lot of verticals. It's, I think, important for education, but it's not as front and center. Really, the places that I see, the technologies that I see being really crucial for education and kind of more visible in education are content filtering and the anti-malware. So content filtering obviously is crucial. We've talked about that a little bit, but anti-malware is also important, because any environment where you've got a lot of semi-unregulated users running around doing all kinds of things, you're going to have malware concerns, right? There might be viruses. People might be downloading things they shouldn't be downloading. And that's actually where we've focused a lot of our time recently, and we've added a brand new capability to the platform. It's available in open beta today. It'll be coming out as generally available very soon, within the next month or two. And that's what we call AMP, or Advanced Malware Protection. It's a Cisco technology. Some of you may have heard of it. If you haven't, no worries. I'll explain briefly what it is. Basically, it is a global malware database that's maintained by the Cisco Talos organization, which is Cisco's world-class threat research organization. That basically is just a list of a ton of different files and whether or not they're malicious. And what we can do is we can actually leverage that database. So with the new AMP capability, every time a file is downloaded through the MX, through the security appliance, we'll check that file against that database. And we'll say, hey, this is a malicious file, block it. Or this is a clean file, leave it alone. Or this is an unknown file. We don't yet know whether it's clean or malicious. It's not in the database. And that's where ThreatGrid comes in. I'll talk about that in just a second. But the key thing here is it allows us to leverage this really phenomenal research, this threat research that the Talos team has been doing for years now, and gives us the best malware database in the world that we can leverage natively without you having to really do anything other than just turn on the feature. We also obviously are going to monitor and log all that data and tell you what kind of viruses people have tried to download, or what kind of files have been downloaded, where they've been downloaded from. And that's where the Security Center on the right comes in, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So a few details about AMP and ThreatGrid. You can learn a ton about AMP from just Googling Cisco AMP or Cisco Advanced Malware Protection. There's a bunch of material available, but there's a lot of really cool capabilities here beyond just that giant database that I was talking about. It's constantly updating. So there are over 500 million known files today, and you can kind of see the breakdown here. But more importantly, at least to me, over 1.5 million incoming brand new samples per day. So not new like, you know, oh, we've seen it new today, new like we've never seen it before. So we're constantly getting this influx of data that we can use here at Cisco to continue to improve this AMP database. It keeps growing. It kind of organically evolves as the threat landscape evolves. And that means we can offer you phenomenally effective malware protection for your campus, right? So it can kind of ease some of the stress of worrying about what happens if a student downloads a malicious file. A couple other things to mention here. One is we will alert even if we discover a file to be malicious after it's been downloaded. So this is really important. Anyone who's familiar with Cisco's security kind of messaging lately has heard of the BDA continuum, or before, during, and after. What that basically means is it's not enough to just try to prevent attacks, things like malware downloads or threat attacks. You have to also assume that some percentage, however small, are going to get through, because that's just the reality of network security. So before is prevention, but during is knowing what's happening during an attack so you can take action to mitigate it, and after is knowing what's happened after an attack so you can make sure you take any necessary action to clean up and make sure it doesn't happen again. And the retrospection falls into that after category. Basically says, okay, you download a file, it's a brand new piece of malware that's never been seen before, it's going to get through. We don't know it's malicious yet. That can happen. It's very rare, but it can happen. A week and a half later, we discover through one of the several means that the Talos organization uses to update this database, that file was malicious. We're now going to mark that as a retrospectively malicious file. We're going to show you an alert in the dashboard, and we're going to send you an email that says, hey, this file was downloaded by some number of clients, and we'll tell you how many clients. And we now know that it's malicious. And you can then go into the Security Center and dashboard, figure out who downloaded that file, and quarantine those devices, wipe those devices, whatever you need to do to make sure your network is safe. Probably the coolest thing about AMP is it doesn't cost anything with Meraki. So if you have a Meraki MX and you have the advanced security license, which the vast majority of K-12 educational institutions already do because it's required for content filtering, you get AMP. The same license that gives you content filtering also gives you AMP at no extra charge. So that's huge. The other thing is ThreatGrid. And ThreatGrid will be coming soon. We'll have more details on that as it gets a little bit closer. But the idea behind ThreatGrid looks something like this. So first things first, user downloads a file from the internet. It hits the MX hashes it, checks that hash against the AMP cloud, and says, okay, is this malicious or not? Now again, as I said, the AMP cloud can come back and say it's malicious, it's clean, or it's unknown. If it's unknown, we can check that file against ThreatGrid. And ThreatGrid allows you to basically send that file to a sandbox, a virtual environment, where we'll execute the file, we'll see everything it does to the machine that we executed in, the virtual environment, and we can, based on that, determine if it's malicious or not. And then we go back and we update the AMP cloud. So now, not only are you protected, but every other AMP user in the world is protected. So the cool thing about ThreatGrid is even if you don't have it, you're still protected by it, because everyone else out there who's using ThreatGrid is submitting files, and all those files are being recorded in that AMP cloud. So if you have AMP but you don't have ThreatGrid, you're still protected by ThreatGrid to some extent because of all the work that's being done by other organizations. All right, so that's my spiel on AMP and ThreatGrid. But the other piece, of course, is the monitoring. So we have a brand new Security Center page that allows you to see all this data, combines together the intrusion prevention data and the virus or malware data to give you an idea of what kind of security threats have been seen on your network, where they're coming from, what clients are generating them, what IPs on the internet that clients are talking to generate them, where they focus geographically, all this information available to you kind of natively. And because of the fact that this is all in the Meraki dashboard, you can pivot from there to a particular client and go and manage that client, block them, set a different policy for them, whatever you want to do, all that can be done without ever leaving the dashboard. So it's very, very simple, and it's integrated into your network management. All right, so let's take a look at a few of these things. I'll spend a few minutes here in the demo. Let me sign back in. And we'll take a look at a couple of Meraki offices, which are kind of my go-to demo locations. So first things first, I'm going to show you what I like to call a standalone MX network. This is our San Francisco office, and the way we've structured this is that we actually have the MX in its own dashboard network, its own management container. There are reasons why we did this. Some of it is for demo purposes, some of it is unrelated. It's something that this is what you would see if a customer only had, or an educational institution only had an MX. So you see all this client information here. You see a variety of configuration options and monitoring options, and we'll go through some of those. But if you don't have any switches, any wireless, this is the interface that you're going to see. Before we dive into the details of the interface, I want to show you something really briefly. This here is our demo landing page. There's kind of options of what organizations I can demo, customers who have agreed to allow us to demo their networks or our own personal networks internally. But on the right here, we have this map. And this map shows the almost 640,000 active Meraki networks that we have in the world right now. This is, as of today, active means we've seen them online in the last 24 hours, talking to the cloud. So when I started at Meraki a little under 4 years ago, this was a much less green map. We were mostly in the US, a little bit of Western Europe. Now you can see we've blanketed the US, Mexico, most of Central America, Canada, Western Europe, most of Eastern Europe, parts of South America and Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it's huge. It's really cool to see this growth, this adoption of the platform. And that's kind of what I was talking about at the top of the session when I said that we've really seen phenomenal adoption of this technology, which is very exciting for us. It's something that I think is really cool. So with that, let's talk about a few of the capabilities of Dashboard, and let's take a look at them. I spent a lot of time talking about monitoring, the ability to see what's happening on the network. This clients page, which is where I land when I first log into this network, is one of the key places where you can do that. So you can see what kind of applications are using your bandwidth. So iTunes, using up a decent chunk of bandwidth here. I can actually, as you can see, mouse over these different pieces, and it'll highlight the portion of my overall bandwidth in that top graph that's associated with that type of traffic. A little bit of iTunes, a little bit of Spotify, some Pandora, SoundCloud, a lot of music going on here, fair enough. But I can also go in and drill down to specifically iTunes. And I can see what users or what devices on the network are using all of this bandwidth to talk to iTunes. Tyler on the MX product team is actually about 29% of the overall iTunes usage for the last day by himself, right? So maybe that's something I want to take action on. Maybe I want a bandwidth limit. Maybe I want to go talk to him, block him from the network. Whatever I want to do, I can take action based on that. And I can see the breakdown here of other devices. I can also see what servers out there in the world, either URLs or IP addresses, these users are talking to that we're considering to be iTunes servers. They're blurred out because I'm in demo mode. If you were actually the administrator of this network, you would see the individual URLs or IPs. Back to the clients page, I can also look at it from the other side. So instead of looking at it from an application perspective, let's take a client and look at that client. So let's use Tyler again, just because I can pick on him since we already used him. So if I pull up Tyler, here's his iMac, and I can see how he's connected to the network. I can see what he's doing on the network, how much bandwidth he's using, how many flows he's created, how much active time he spent on Facebook, right? So there's a lot of information here available to me, and I can scroll through the pages here. There's a whole bunch of data. I can also see policy information, right? How much bandwidth he's allotted, how many firewalls are applied. I can change the policy if I want to either blocked or whitelisted or a custom policy I've created. Network information, I can ping his client, see what his connection to the network looks like to troubleshoot, send a wake on LAN. There's a ton of stuff that I can do in here. There's actually more I can do if he's also got Systems Manager installed. So if he has the MDM, I can actually do software management directly from here as well, or jump over into the MDM portion of the dashboard to get a little bit deeper into that. I'm not going to do that today just because I want to stay focused on security. I'm just going to show you a couple pages quickly before we move in to the kind of last few slides and wrap up with the Q&A. So this is the security center. We just turned this on in our headquarters, our San Francisco headquarters, a couple weeks ago. So you can see here, we've got a little over 2 weeks of data. And this is by default filtered for only intrusion attempts and malicious files. So we could say we want to see unknown files, we want to see clean files, we want to see a variety of things. We can tune this. We can see the clients that are generating most of these events. Again, I can go in and pull up that specific client, the same way I did with Tyler before, and manage that client or see what they're doing on the network. Or I can go in and pivot based on the specific threat, see details of that threat. I can see some information, some research information about that threat. I can see what kind of sources and destinations there are for these threats. Most of these are coming from inside the US, and I can actually click on one and see where it is, do a who is, right? Bunch of data available to me. See the breakdown by operating system. It's all in one kind of security monitoring built in. I can go, of course, and see the individual events as well, specifically where were files downloaded from, what kind of threats are being generated, timestamps, sources, destinations, etc. So now I want to jump actually over into our London office to show you the other type of network, which is a full stack network. So while San Francisco is currently set up as a standalone MX, London is set up in the full stack deployment. So if we look here at this side panel, we're actually going to see that we've got security, switching, and wireless in this one unified pane. I can go in and see VPN data between my locations, how much bandwidth is passing between the London office and my other offices. I can see, again, security information. I can go in and configure things like bandwidth limits through traffic shaping. And one of the coolest things, I can configure what are called group policies. So group policies are the other thing I want to show you before we kind of move back into the slides. If we have time at the end after questions, I'll jump back in and show you the VPN configuration, because that's a really, really cool functionality that I think is very important if you have multiple sites or multiple campuses. But I want to highlight group policies because they're a cool full stack functionality. So group policies allow you to create policies, obviously, for different groups of users, right? Pretty straightforward. But these policies can be applied to wireless clients on the MR access points or to wired clients on the MX security appliance. So it's one of those things that kind of is even better if you have multiple Meraki products. If you have Systems Manager, you can apply these policies based on MDM posture as well, like I mentioned earlier. So I can go in and create bandwidth limits, create layer 3 or layer 7 firewall rules, right? Traffic shaping rules. So let's block Amazon Instant Video. Let's also say that World of Warcraft is only allowed 250 kilobits per second, right? And it's deprioritized as being super, super low priority. So we can set a whole variety of these rules in a given group policy, security filtering rules, different content filtering categories and patterns, and we can apply this to a particular client in the clients page, in that list that we looked at earlier. We can apply it based on Active Directory groups. We can apply it based on VLAN. There's a variety of different ways to apply these policies. All right, so we're going to jump now. I apologize, I meant to spend more time in the demo, but I kind of got caught up in the slides. But we will hopefully have a couple minutes right here at the end for me to go back and show you the VPN configuration, because it is quite cool. But first, let's take a look at the product lineup. So this is the MX family today. We have the MX 64 and 64W, 65 and 65W, sort of on the smaller end. This is not something you're generally going to see for a campus deployment, but you will see them if you have a small satellite or a small kind of education outpost. I think for the most part, campuses start more in the 400, 600, maybe the 100. But you can see here the lineup of kind of how the different products line up in our portfolio for MX. On the far right side, you have the teleworker unit, the Z1 as well, which I'm not really going to spend any time on today, but it is a cool little kind of drop-in all-in teleworker unit that uses the same auto VPN functionality as the MX products, which means that you literally just tell it, I want to connect you to the main campus, go, and it figures out the how all by itself. So all of it is what we call cloud brokered VPN, where you literally just click, I want you to talk to you, and it figures out crypto maps, NAT exemptions, all the technical details of how to do that automatically. From a licensing perspective, there are 2 licenses. Enterprise includes almost everything. Advanced Security includes everything that Enterprise has, plus the content filtering we talked about, intrusion prevention, the anti-malware, and geo-firewalling. So that's the distinction. If you have Advanced Security, you have absolutely everything. If you have Enterprise, you have everything except the 4 features listed on the right of this slide. We talked about wireless switching and MDM. There's one that's not on this slide. And the reason it's not on this slide is we literally launched it today. So I'm very excited. I don't have a slide for this, but I'm going to tell you. I'm very excited to announce the newest member of the Meraki family, the Cisco Meraki MC, specifically the MC74, which is a brand new cloud-managed IP phone. So it's the first time since I think 2012, maybe 2013, that we've launched a brand new product family, new product line here at Meraki. Very exciting. You can find out all about it if you go to meraki.cisco.com. There's a big banner right on the front page. You can click on it. It'll take you to learn more about that if you're interested in learning more about managing your kind of phone system through that same cloud dashboard that we looked at today and integrating it with other Meraki products. So again, just like with switching, security, wireless, and MDM, the phones are managed through that same cloud dashboard, all integrated together in a very simple, unified interface. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a K-12 offer that we have for you. So we have a discounting offer available for 5-year licensing for Cisco Meraki products. For any K-12 school or library, you can get pretty aggressive discounting on 5-year licenses if they're associated with new hardware. So if it's not a license renewal. All these details are available here on this slide. So I'm not going to stress too much about going through every point. You can read through this. But it's available for pretty much every license. Reach out to your reseller or your Meraki sales specialist, your Meraki rep, to learn more about this. It's a great opportunity for K-12 customers to kind of get in there and get some really great discounting on those products or on those licenses. This is designed especially to help out E-rate customers. Speaking of E-rate, let's talk about E-rate eligibility. So how does all of this work within the context of E-rate? Actually don't know what the phone story is for E-rate, so I'm not going to get into that. The fact that it's not listed here should not be taken as reflecting that it's not E-rate eligible. I just don't know if it is, personally. So if you want to know about that, reach out to your rep. Of course, they'll be able to help you out. But for the MR access points, MS switches, and MX security appliances, hardware is 100% E-rate eligible. There is no hardware for the Systems Manager MDM. It's purely a software product. On the licensing side, wireless and switch licenses completely eligible for E-rate. MX Enterprise licensing, completely eligible for E-rate. If you want the advanced security license, which includes the content filtering, GIP firewalling, the new AMP functionality, right, malware protection, and intrusion prevention, that's 50% E-rate eligible. The reason for that is it's double the price of enterprise licensing. So the 50%, that half that is the enterprise cost, is E-rate eligible. But unfortunately, for reasons that boggle the mind, content filtering is not an E-rate eligible technology. So there is no E-rate eligibility for that other half of the advanced security license. But that's why we have things like the promotion that I was just talking about to kind of help you manage that. Systems Manager licenses are not E-rate eligible today. I personally would love to see that change because it's such a phenomenal product for education, and so many of our Systems Manager customers are education customers, but today we do not have E-rate eligibility there. So what's next? Well, if you want to try any of our products, you can do that by going to meraki.cisco.com/eval, filling out the evaluation form, and you can actually try any Meraki product. So if you have a deployment where you think Meraki would be a good fit, either for MX or for the other products, you can try that out for yourself and see what you think. You can also learn more on our blog, meraki.cisco.com/blog, where we post new information, updates about new products, new product lines now, of course, with the phone, new features, what's going on with us as a company, just basically a really good way for you to keep up with what's happening with Meraki, both as a company and as a technology. And then finally, your best resource for all things Meraki, your Cisco Meraki rep. So if you don't know who your rep is or you don't think you have one, you can go to meraki.cisco.com/contact, which is our contact form that'll get you in touch with the right person to help you out. Of course, if you already know who your rep is, great, you've already got that resource. So with that, let me see what kind of questions we have available, and if I've got time, I will give you a quick VPN demo as well. Hey Larry, I'm not sure I understand. Larry has a question that I'm not sure I follow. So Larry, if you can maybe clarify a little bit what your question is, I'll be happy to answer it. Luis wants to know, since I said it gives better results to limit bandwidth than to block content, is there a way to limit bandwidth to a single app, to a single user? Let's see. So you can absolutely create a policy specifically to limit a particular app and apply it to a particular user with that group policy functionality that I was talking about. So most of the time we don't see group policies used that granularly, because obviously if you want to create 1,000 policies, that can be kind of a pain, but it is possible. So if you have a couple specific problem users, a small number, and as we all know, there's that kind of truism that 5% of your users cause 95% of your problems, right? If you've got a small group of users that are really the big bandwidth abusers, the bandwidth hogs, you can create customized individual policies for them if you want. If that's effective for your organization, by all means, that is a thing that's available. Great question from Jason. Is there a capability to set bandwidth quotas, like daily or weekly quotas per client? There is not today. It's something that's come up before. We've heard the question before. We do not have any quota capability for bandwidth limiting. It's all based on rate limiting. It's something that we've looked at before. We may look at again in the future, but as far as I know, there are no firm immediate plans. Jorge has a question about SSL decryption. So I assume what you're asking, Jorge, is can we decrypt SSL traffic? Not today. It is something that is on the MX roadmap. It's something we're going to be adding. I can't provide an ETA yet because product has not given me a public-facing ETA at this point, but it is something that is being worked on by the engineering team and that we hope to have very soon. James wants to know, I assume this is a question about Systems Manager, is there anything in development to change an EXE file to an MSI file for pushing apps to devices? I don't know, is the honest answer. I'm not an expert on Systems Manager. I'm on the security side, specifically the MX security appliance, but that's a great question to reach out and ask your rep, and if they don't know, they'll be able to talk to the Systems Manager team and get a definitive answer for you there. Kiss wants to know if the traffic is going through the public internet. If you're using a Meraki AP, okay, I think I understand the question. I think what Kiss is asking is if you're talking from a client on an AP to another client on an AP, is the traffic going like out to the internet and back? No. The traffic, again, the traffic is routed exactly the same way it would be with a non-cloud managed solution. So if you're talking from one client to another client on the network, it's going to pass through the network just routed through the network normally. It's not going to go out to the internet because none of the user data goes to the cloud. There's no user traffic going to the cloud. Only the command and control, the management traffic going between the device and the cloud. Everything else is routed either locally or to the internet, depending on your configuration, the same way it would be with any other solution. Eric wants to know, will the software still capture user data if the user bypasses their DNS settings? Yes, we do not rely on kind of the MX being used as a DNS proxy in order to capture this data. There are some things that we use DNS redirects for, but they're functionality that you basically turn on to do that. But as long as the DNS traffic is going through the MX, we'll still inspect it, and we'll be able to capture all that. We also don't just capture DNS. There are other things that we can look at from an analytics and a monitoring perspective. So we will still be able to capture that data. Jorge wants to know where he can download a copy of the PowerPoint. I believe, but I'm not 100% positive, that there will be a link to either a recording or the PowerPoint download or both in the thank you email you received for attending the webinar. If you don't get that, because I could be wrong, I'm not infallible, reach out to your rep and ask. Tell them that it was a webinar presented by Joe Aronow, which is me, and just ask them, tell them I said go ahead and reach out to me and I'll make sure that they get that PowerPoint to you. But I believe that you guys will have this made available to you. Anthony wants to know if a user or app is rate limited, right, but there is extra available bandwidth, can the user or app use more than they're limited to? Not at a per app level. We do have sort of a bandwidth bursting capability. If you have like a global bandwidth limit set, but there's more bandwidth available and a client's downloading something small, we can just grab really quickly, we'll burst through the bandwidth limit. And that's, you can enable or disable that. But no, for the most part, the rate limits are pretty much strict rate limits. So even if there's more available bandwidth, we don't want to assume that that's the functionality you want. If you configured a rate limit, we assume you want to enforce that rate limit. All right, I'm going to take one or two more questions here, and then we're going to have to wrap up. Jason wants to know if you can tag or label traffic to or from test providers like Pearson. I mean, we do support DSCP tagging and PCP tagging, if that's what you mean. I don't know what other tagging infrastructures they may use. I'm not super familiar with kind of how Pearson, NWEA, and the others handle traffic that's sent to them. But you can do things like DSP and PCP tagging natively with either the access points or the security appliances. Question about Active Directory integration. We do have native Active Directory integration, so you can have the MX talk directly to your AD servers and pull login events in order to determine who is logging on to client devices, and then apply policies based on their Active Directory groups, or get obviously monitoring data based on their user information. So there's one final thing that I want to mention, and then I'm going to have to wrap up. I'm going to answer Eric's question real quick because it's the last one, and then I'm going to say one final thing and wrap up. Are there any time settings? Yes, absolutely. Group policies can be enabled or disabled based on time schedules. So all the stuff we saw in the group policies you can set for certain times of day or certain days of the week. The final thing I'm going to tell you is education is a big focus for the MX right now, and there's a lot of stuff that you're going to be hearing about in the coming months if you keep an eye on the blog and you kind of keep up with what's going on in Meraki about things we're doing to really make the product even more compelling for education. We're looking at a lot of improvements to logging, which is one thing that comes up with our education customers. They want really detailed, fine-tuned logging. They want a lot of historical data about what users are doing, where they're going on the internet. We're working at building out a lot of function around that, and we're building out improved bandwidth for the higher-end models. The MX400 and 600, which currently support up to a gigabit per second of throughput, aren't necessarily enough for a lot of our E-rate customers who have 5 gig or 10 gig links. So we are actually looking at, we have software improvements that we're working on for those products that are going to improve the bandwidth capabilities and some existing hardware components that can be used in tandem with that to bump those numbers up into the 5 and 10 gig range to allow you to use, let's say, a 5 gig E-rate funded link with an MX400 or 600. So stay tuned for more on that. That's kind of the last thing that I just wanted to highlight because it's going to be, I think, very important for those folks in the education space. All right, since Timothy has one last question, I'm going to answer it real quick, and then we're going to wrap up. How do you get onto an E-rate approved vendor list for Cisco? I have no idea is the short answer. I'm sorry. But if you reach out to your rep, the education sales team here at Meraki, obviously much more eligible or much more knowledgeable, sorry, about E-rate than I am. So reach out to them, and they'll be able to help you out. So with that, I'm 1 minute over time, so I'm going to cut now. Thank you all for joining me. Hopefully you got some good information today, and don't forget to reach out to your rep if you want to learn more. And have a great rest of your day.